Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. It's your host, Sarah, and today I'm really excited to have Nicole here. Nicole is going to talk to us about her journey with borderline and her advocacy work and nonprofit work and her podcast, which has the cutest name and the funniest name I think any person with borderline could come up with. And so I'll let her share that with you, but hint, it's in the title of this episode. Nicole, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. I'm so excited. I am definitely a BPD warrior, as I like to say, for sure. But most importantly, a mom to an amazing 13-year-old. I'm a career and leadership coach, but I guess why I'm here today is because I'm also the host of the I Can't Even Kill Myself Right podcast. And it is a podcast about the BPD experience. And as well as I'm the founder of Press Pause Inc., which is a nonprofit that provides support, resources, and drives awareness for individuals with BPD.
I love it. I love it. You guys listening, is that not like the greatest podcast name? I mean, I want to hear about why you chose that name for your podcast, but we'll get to it. Um, Nicole, tell us about kind of like your journey. Where were you raised? Like what was childhood like? Kind of when did you start to experience BPD symptoms?
So in my mom's womb, I'm just kidding. So it feels that way. Let her tell the stories about what it was like to give birth to me. And she would tell the stories. My both of my parents are Jamaican. And so storytelling is a big deal in, our community and our culture. And so she would tell the story about how it always felt like I didn't want to come into the world because of like I was holding on for dear life inside because I wouldn't come out. And so she was in labor for like a very long time. And she knew that I would be trouble. And so I guess she pretty much paved the way for me because from the time that I started school, I was ostracized, bullied, labeled as to this, to that, you name it. But it wasn't until probably about after I was hit by a car at 14 and started having some really bad issues. I came out the coma and I was like, my legs were paralyzed. I couldn't remember anything. And I just started having all kinds of issues with mind, body, spirit. Everything was kind of out of whack. And so after a couple of, violations and abuse, led to kind of my first major attempt around 14 or so to unalive myself. And and through that it was kind of went the wake up call of uh-oh, something's really going on wrong with me. And something is going on with me. And that first attempt and several attempts thereafter is really what led to the title of the podcast, and it's because of so many failed attempts and and feeling like I remember at the end of it was going, damn, I can't even do this right, and that was pretty much like the journey of the whole BPD experience, is the feeling of God, every nothing that I could try, makes it better.
Yeah, wow. That I can only imagine like being 14 and having this thing happen and then all of the consequences for your physical health that happened afterwards.
It is a thing in West Indian culture where you don't talk about mental health, right? So I know that my father was in a facility, and that wasn't disclosed to me until I was like in my 30s. And I know because I lived with her firsthand that my mother was pretty close. Now, I don't know if it was if her, I know it was definitely OCD, some narcissism there. Like, I'm not the provider to diagnose, but I feel like there was definitely some overlap, between the two parents. It was kind of like a no-brainer that I would have some of this journey of my own to deal with.
Yeah. And what was like, because you're 14, presumably you're in the medical system for God, probably forever, trying to navigate this coma. And I mean, months and months on end, I would imagine. And what we need in such a vulnerable state is our parents to show up, be on our bedside, and really advocate for us in this medical system. How did you feel supported or not supported by your parents during that time?
I did not feel supported, unfortunately. The Who I felt supported by were the kids that I went to school with and the teachers, because when I came out of the coma, they were like, well, the school was like, she still needs to be accountable for her schoolwork, otherwise she's gonna have to repeat this grade. And my teachers and my friends at school got together and made sure that my brother, who also went to the same school, had my work, and they helped me, kind of make sure because my grades were always really good. So they were kind of advocating like, no, she doesn't need to repeat the grade. But in addition to not being fully supported by the school system, that my parents and everybody else was kind of, they were blaming me for the toll that it was taking on my mom. And so there was no, when I woke up, there was no comforting. There was just right back to familiar of, you better make sure you catch up on all your work. You better make sure you don't embarrass, all of these things. But in the meantime, I had to walk to school with this brace on my leg and this metal cane, and not really having the information or the words of to what what do I do now? Because there was no insurance, there was no additional support once I left. It was basically like aftershock therapy to bring my legs back and my speech returned and everything else. It was just like go forth and conquer, and so that's what I had to do. And I didn't have, I couldn't ask her anything. My father was in Jamaica. There was no relationship there for a number of reasons, and so let whoever told the story, it was your mom didn't allow you to communicate with me, and then the others was he didn't do anything to try, so it was always the jury is out on what the real story is. But the end result was that I didn't have any support or guidance to say, okay, here's what to expect, here's how to navigate. But what happened was all of the health issues that I believe came about as a result of being hit by this car, they were dismissed from like the minute that I started trying to advocate for myself. Once I graduated high school, etc., it was dismissed, ignored. You're too young to be experiencing blah, blah, blah. It was always some kind of dismissal, which really led me to uh, feeling like there is no answer for me. And obviously not knowing why I was trying to exit this universe, on so many occasions of not feeling like worthy, and then having a mother who just clearly did not love you and clearly was bothered by you, hence the verbal and physical assaults. And so it was really difficult trying to figure out like, and I remember too, just as a side version, like I was so desperate during that time to find community or connection somewhere and to not feel like being hit by a car was my fault too, in addition to being born and everything else, that I finally said, I want to go to Jamaica and I want to have a relationship with my father. And one of my aunts took mercy on me and she paid for the trip. And when I went there, the very first thing that my father said to me, he hasn't seen me since I was 4. The very first thing was, I'm glad you're alive. Not thank, it was, what the hell did you put in your hair? Who did that? I don't like it. The
That makes
first
me
thing.
so angry for you. So angry for you.
I was like, wait, what now? So immediately I shut down on that. I was like, and then he told me, oh, well, his way of making up to me for that was to say to me that I could I had made a few friends there. One guy I was interested, had a crush on, and etc. And so I was lonely again. And so he was like, "Oh, well, you can talk to your friend. Don't worry, I'll pay for the bill. You can call your mom if you're missing her. I'll pay for the bill at your aunt's house." And this, I have no idea of how much it costs to make a phone call, right? In Jamaica. So I literally had no idea. Do you know that bill was thousands of dollars, unbeknownst to me? Of course, he never paid it, but I became the black sheep of the family because of that. Like I did that on purpose. So it was, so not only did I not have any support prior to the car accident, but once I went down to Jamaica to try to cultivate this new wave of support, I was immediately ostracized there too for running up my phone bill.
Hmm. I mean, I'm hearing a theme here of you being the scapegoat.
For sure, for sure. And because you don't know any better, part of BPD land is, well, I must have done something for them to feel this way, or to be treating me this way. So this just further validates the fact that I'm not worthy or I don't need to be on this planet.
Hmm. Do you think your mom resented you for having a quote unquote hard pregnancy with you or hard birthing process?
I do. I do. I believe it to my core because I actually heard my mother say to a room full of people, and yes, there was alcohol involved, but I didn't know that she didn't know that I was there. And she said that my father, because they were having issues at the time, she didn't have it. When she had my brother, she was so happy with my brother that she didn't want any more kids. And my father made her, he's like, "Oh, you're going to give me a girl," and there was very much um, it wasn't up to her, kind of is what the sense that I got. And so I walked into the room in time to hear her telling people that she never wanted me. And those are the words that she used. She never wanted me. She did not want to have another child, and she was forced to. So you can imagine that I'm sure that's the resentment that I probably latched onto inside of her womb. That's probably why I didn't want to come the hell out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they say trauma begins at conception, right? And even before conception and like the biological component of that. And I don't know what you consider to be kind of how you kind of define that act of like not consenting to having a baby, but that's pretty profound. And also how ironic that your dad was like, we're gonna have this baby and it better be a girl, but he's gone.
Right?
That's
Exactly.
not fair.
It's amazing because he was on his own mental health journey and he has serious mental health issues to the point where he was in a facility, a psychiatric facility, and his entire family, like he lived with my grandmother until she passed away at 102, I think it was. Um, and it wasn't until I went down there at another attempt, now I'm in my 40s, another attempt to go connect with him, and I wound up getting into it with him and walking away. And again, we're in Mandeville, Jamaica, so it's like, there's not, you can't easily find your way back or whatever from where. So I was just walking like I knew where I was going. And so eventually he came to find me, but he said that was the time because he saw that I was not backing down this time and not treating him with respect and just like, no, you will give me an answer and this time. And he finally said the rage and the feelings that he had towards his mom. And but yet I said to him, the difference is that regardless of how you felt about them or how they might have felt about you, they supported you once they found out, like in terms of protecting him, like no one knew his story. You know what I'm saying? Unless you were like that close to the family. You know what I'm saying? But nobody would talk about it, not even my mom. You know what I'm saying? And she knew. So I'm telling you, people just lied to my face when I would ask them stories about, his mental health, even when I was trying to get information so that I could figure out how to help myself. I was like, I need to know these things. And I was told, nope, I don't have anything.
Yeah, that's incredibly unfair. I mean, it's one thing if you're hiding it because you want to hide it, like, okay, sir, fine. But like it's another thing when it's your child saying, I need to know like the genetics here so that I can kind of like help my medical team properly diagnose me.
Hmm.
Mm. Is your dad still alive?
He is, yes.
Do y'all have any contact or is that no contact?
No contact now.
How do you feel about being no contact? It can be so liberating.
It it's weird, when they talk about two things can be true at the same time. Well, yes, I feel both liberated, um, because I don't have to deal with his questions. I don't feel like he ever really got over my mom. And so, in spite of knowing how, really bad she was to me, every time he'd get on the phone with me, the first question is, how's your mom? Or if I tried to, express or vent to him about her, he would come to her like defense in the conversation. So it was like re-triggering my trauma. So I was like, yeah, this is not a good look for me. So while I, care about your well-being and I, have respect for you in that regard, it's not good for me because you refuse to acknowledge my boundaries of me telling you that these are certain things that I don't want to talk about with you or for you to ask me about. And he can't adhere to them. So as a result, I just cut ties.
Yeah, we love a boundary. So this accident happened. You worked really hard to rehabilitate, it sounds like, but then kind of some of the consequences of this is like ongoing physical health symptoms, issues, whatever you want to call it. And then of course those impact your mental health, but tell me about like what are those symptoms or conditions and how did you kind of like finally put a name to them?
It was really interesting because I I promise you this is part of the trauma that I thought I must be doing something wrong to have these feelings and these flare-ups in my body. that that everyone else was saying was in my brain, right? Or in my mind. And so I started hiding from like in shame, like, oh my God, even though like my fingers are numb, or blue or in pain, and then it was like, then I had the knee stuff started and it was just like taking over, tightness in my legs and every time with autoimmune stuff, unless you're like having an active flare while you're at the doctor, while your other doctors are there, you know what I'm saying, talking about what they saw too, it's so difficult to get diagnosed. They dismiss it almost immediately. I have had every autoimmune diagnosis in addition to every mental health diagnosis. And when it comes to getting a true diagnosis, I was in my 20s and I went to a psychic fair, and the clairvoyant at the psychic fair is who told me I had BPD. True story. And then the rheumatologist, best rheumatologist ever, Dr. Shatton, who has passed away from cancer, he was amazing because he was the first one to do exactly what you described when we were talking earlier about how, all the specialists get in a room and they talk to each other. He did that and he was able to validate things that they had told me right after my car accident. The two things that they said right after I got hit by the car was Sjogren syndrome, Raynaud's. And then the other things started happening, like rashes on my body, primarily like my face. And then it was like other things that were seeming like there were a virus, like I had the flu or something. It was just all kinds of weird, all over the place, different type of symptoms. And so he was able to listen to me he got my history stemming from when I was hit by the car. Like it was a holistic approach to finally where he was like, yes, you do have Sjogren's, you do have Raynaud's, but you also have lupus and you also have rheumatoid arthritis. And here's how we're gonna approach it. And I remember even like my mom and my then former best friend were like, now all you talk about is your autoimmune stuff, this and your autoimmune stuff, that. And I'm like, yeah, because now I have a plan. Now I'm not feeling like a hypochondriac over here, like waking up one day and I'm like, oh, this is, going wrong. And they're like, oh, take some migraine medicine, or this is going wrong. You know what I'm saying? Everybody was like individual symptoms, but not realizing that all of this together was like a big deal, and these were like serious issues. And I remember when I was pledging a sorority in undergrad, I got like beat down because I couldn't like sit on my knees as long as everybody else and do other, because these were like causing pain and flare-ups and swelling and edema issues and you name it. And they were like thinking that I was punking out, of the pledge process. But I'm like, how do you tell them that no, I don't know what it is, but I know something is going on with my body? So it took between the clairvoyant and my rheumatologist to get it together to say, here's what you have autoimmune wise. And she was the one that was like, here's what you have with your mental health side of things. And I didn't even like, I was angry with her that I didn't even take her seriously. I was like, no. I called my friend who had just gotten her oh God, I forget what it is. When she just got her degree in psychology, and so she had the then DSM-4, and so she was going through it and diagnosing me. You don't have this and da da da, because everything I had researched about it was doom and gloom. You're gonna die. It's no, you know what I'm saying? You can't survive this. Recovery is not possible. All of these things. And I was like, oh my God. And so I don't want this. And so I was like really mad with her. And I was like, you're not a professional. How are you telling me this? And blah, blah, blah. So of course I listened to my friend who has the degree in psychology, who's like, yeah, no, she's wrong. And of course, I went back to getting misdiagnosed. And so until about 7 years ago, when I finally met a mental health provider who was able to say, yep, this is what it is. And kind of like with my rheumatologist, and you also have PTSD, and you also have severe social anxiety disorder. And it was just like going down the list.
Yeah. At this point, I kind of feel like, well, let's just like, wear the laundry list like a badge of honor because it's what else do you do, you know? There's like 7 diagnoses in my chart that's mental health. I mean, whatever.
Exactly, whatever. And I laugh at all of them because I'm just like, and I used to say this, I'm like, I have lupus. Lupus doesn't have me, or something to that effect, because I was determined when I got diagnosed, like even with the mental health journey, I was like, why is everything that I am getting, no, there's no cure for? Like none, zero. You just have to manage this forever and ever and ever to, like, yeah, I'm supposed to be excited about life and this is my journey. Like, really? But it was through me rejecting all these labels that allowed me to still like navigate it and be focused on my recovery, because I was like, yeah, I reject that. I don't buy into there's no this, there's no, I rejected it. I was like, I'm not. And for some reason that helped me, kind of each time that I would fall down, and it would help, that thought process would help me kind of get back up.
Yeah, absolutely. That autoimmune stuff, right? I mean, again, it's like it's so tied to childhood trauma and begins at conception and like the genetic history. We know that autoimmune is has very strong ties to trauma because like the the body can't then understand why it's releasing so much cortisol into the system all of the time for like the fight or flight trauma stuff that it essentially starts to release all of these other things and then it kind of eats itself. It's this very strange, that's not a medical way of explaining it. And Nicole, I'm sure you could explain it better, but that's kind of the way that it's been explained to me is the autoimmune and the trauma is so closely connected. And I mean, it's not surprising to me that this came after this huge physical traumatic event, but then all of the mental stuff that happened after the car accident.
I would 1,000% agree with the way that you described it. It's all related. And I think that if we all, even as a society, just stop, I mean, I really feel like you're just onto something, in terms of it being a holistic approach is critical to the recovery side of things, because they're all interconnected. And so, you know, I just, I don't know. It's when I started practicing Buddhism and they're like, yeah, there's a Buddha in everything. We're all connected. And I was like, everything? Like I remember going, okay, even to that tree over there, like I was having a hard time processing, but it was like, yes, everything's necessary and there's a connectedness to everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, that just kind of helps reframe things from a, less of a doom and gloom perspective. And so that's
Yeah.
what helps me.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think, like that kind of, it takes many years to kind of practice the acceptance and to kind of stop fighting it and then figuring out how to work with it. And I've always said this podcast is selfish because I kind of loop it back to me often, but my mom has rheumatoid arthritis and She got diagnosed when I was 17, so it's been, 15 years since her diagnosis, and I have watched her for all of those years fight it. And she was a public school teacher forever. She got the diagnosis and she was like, "Okay, well, I have to go back to school to get my," she already had her master's, but she was like, "I need to go back to get my essentially doctorate to become a principal because I can't write anymore, so I can't grade papers. So I'll just be a principal." And I'm thinking like, I don't know about that because you're going to have to walk laps around the high school all the time and go to everything Friday night football. And, uh, during those 15 years, she had a stroke. She fell and put her head through a wall. She has an aneurysm, all of these things. And this year, she, I guess she's working towards like an early medical retirement and she's starting to understand and she was like, and I'm learning coping skills, and I was just thinking, fuck, I'm
Wow.
so proud of you, but also 15 years of fighting it, you know
Yeah.
it hurts. I can only imagine, like, my mom has RA and I've watched her go through all this stuff, but you have RA, lupus, Sjogren's, I forget the other one because there's so many. Like, you live with a profound amount of these intersecting things every day.
And your parents are telling you it's all in your head, shake it off. What are you what are you upset about? It's like it's unbelievable. And it's especially with what you just shared, like watching your mom that's like so difficult, and then you're like fast forward all these years later, how do you not feel some sense of like frustration for if you had just done these things 15 years ago, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to now. But on the other side, you're like, but you're glad because now there's insight and healing to be, had for that individual. And who doesn't want that for the people that, we care about? So, but at the same time, you're like, if we just had this information sooner or knew about this approach sooner. And giving, I think, even ourselves grace in family units and cultural communities to talk about these things, and same way that we talk about, oh, it takes a village when it comes to, raising kids or whatever, it's the same approach to me when it comes to like our mental and physical health journey.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You just referenced a DBT skill that I forget the name of, but it's that like yes, yes and, not yet, yes,
Hmm.
but it's the yes and of like, yes, it's super frustrating and I'm glad she's here, that I wish I could remember that skill that you referenced, but it's like such an
Hmm.
important skill that you're talking about.
And both are true at the same
Yes.
time. Yes, I love that.
Yes,
Yeah.
both are true. That's like one of the DBT things that stands out for me has always been uh, one, do no harm, and two things can be true at once.
Yes. It's so simple, but it helps. Like when you're in the middle of something, when you're like, okay, it doesn't have to be a battle. Like this thought can be okay, and my thought can be okay. These two can exist at the same time. And so, and both of them can be right. So, okay, this is not a deal breaker, but
Totally. I've observed my mom navigate a healthcare system that is, wildly imperfect for everyone. And my mom's a white woman. And your experience is not that experience. And so I'm wondering if you can share a bit about the experience of navigating healthcare systems and mental health care systems as a Jamaican woman, person of color. I'm not sure how you kind of identify yourself as Black or a person of color, what term feels good for you, but please kind of share some insight about that for you. I think it's important to know, especially for white people, like what the experience of other people is like.
yeah, it's super frustrating because there does seem to be a double-edged sword, and I really do appreciate the you asking the question because it's it's almost like the group think of it all, like how we've gotten so comfortable and used to like I used to take a I'm all over the place with this one because I'm super passionate, but I'll try to keep it short because it makes me like angry and at the injustice of it or the injustice. But when I just left my ex-husband and I was trying to explain to my son, I think he was like 6 or 7, and in addition to like being overwhelmed by so many things, I was in the verge of like having a breakdown and also having to go back to work. And my ex-husband wasn't giving us any money. So it was a whole lot of things. And then on top of that, my son was super angry with me about leaving my ex. And so I was dealing with all of the I hate you, I want to live with that, all that stuff. And so it just I don't even know how it occurred to me, but I went in the bathroom and I took some paper towels and I wet the paper towels. And I was just like, I just kept putting one thing on top of it. And I would go, okay, son, this is mommy's autoimmune stuff. Okay, this is, whatever. And I just kept putting stuff on top of it. And I was like, you see what's happening? And he was like, oh, it's about to break. It's about to break. And he thought it was a game. And so I kept putting stuff until eventually everything popped right through the center of the paper towels. And I said, this is what my journey is like. When someone tells you it's enough, it's too much, we have to listen. We have to hear that person. We cannot put our male perspective on it. We can't put our, cultural upbringing perspective on it. We can't do that. We have to remember that we're human beings. And I always, even when I teach this ethics class, I'll say, okay, you've got so many people. How many people would you save? And people always go with the larger number in the scenario until I say, what if one of the people in the smaller group was your wife or your sister? All of a sudden, their perspective changes. And I'm always like, why can't we just do that when it comes to how we support individuals who don't look like us, who weren't raised like us, just human beings because I'm over if one more person tells me like now I'm in my 50s. So they can't say to me but I'm telling you up until about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was still getting you're not at that age where you need to worry about this with any of the symptoms that I would try to discuss, whether it was the mental or the physical health stuff. Or I was told my mom would say to me, her mantra to me was, you're too sensitive, shake it off, tough it out. It's the experience as a black woman that we're already supposed to take on more. Why do you think that phrase of behind every good man, there's a strong woman, right? Because that is legit how it goes because most women are taking on more. When my ex-husband lost his job, which he lost on purpose, and I was pregnant with for the first time, right? High risk pregnancy, all of my autoimmune stuff on flare, and I had not been working. My mother-in-law would bring me documents for job fairs in the area. All the women in my life were like, now, you got to make sure that you pay extra attention to him right now because when a man loses his job, like I can't tell you how many conversations I sat through. But when I would say to them, My mother-in-law gets up at 4 in the morning and she's praising Jesus, or she's starting um the dryer and the washing machine, and I've just gotten to sleep or put my son down, and I'm like, and it's flaring up my autoimmune stuff. Crickets in terms of support. When I be like, I've got to walk upstairs to use the bathroom and I can't sit down on lower bathrooms because of my knees. Crickets. You think anyone like came to? No, because it's the expectation that we're just supposed to take it and take it and take it and take it in silence. Don't say it with your out loud voice. You can't say any of that. And that is really dangerous because now you throw mental health stuff in there. So we're supposed to take the physical pain and ignore that and suffer through being dismissed or whatever. But now that's having an impact on your mental health. Oh, you definitely can't say that out loud. And so because we're forced to hide that. And when you're talking about hiding this intense BPD experience, now I'm not saying anything that, is less if you have depression or whatever. I'm not saying anything is less, but BPD is all I can say. It's on its whole other spectrum. And when it comes to being dismissed when you're already hiding so much, it's dangerous to do that, especially when you're asking the same person who's already living in fear, shame of hiding all these things. Oh, but now I need you to tell me your vulnerabilities all over again so I can sit here and judge you, not listen to you, and then make a decision about that you need to go take these meds, even though you just told me that every time that you've taken a medication that you have had a suicide attempt. But I'm going to ignore all of that and just treat you like based on what this book says because and based on these symptoms. And so it's unbelievable, and I'm not exaggerating. It's the way that it goes down.
Yeah. I mean, my guess is like not only are you not exaggerating, but you're under exaggerating, right? Because what statistics do we know about, for example, Black women in childbirth? Like
Hmm.
they have, and Black women in, I think it's like heart disease or something.
Hmm.
There's the statistics of successful births and naming disorders and getting care for disorders that prevent, um, like chronic disability or even death is much, much lower than a white woman, for example.
Sarah, let me tell you a quick story. I fell on some furniture one time and got it cut a little jab in my leg. And I did what most Jamaicans did, right? I go and get some hydrogen peroxide, I'm cleaning it out, whatever. The next day, over the next 2 days, this leg swells up to the size of like I can't even tell you how large it was. It was jarring. So I go to the doctor and it's a specialist. I think it was the osteosurgeon or something. I forget the title. Anyway, so I go to him. He looks at me. They go back and talk and they say, "You've got to go. We've got to check you in right now. You've got a serious infection. It's called, I think they called it, they thought it was MRSA. It turned out it was staph. But at the time they were like, it's MRSA, blah, blah, blah." So they check me in. Promise you. They come in, these two doctors come in, never seen them before in my life. And so they're telling me the only option available for what just happened, given my autoimmune stuff, right, that everybody's always having a hard time finding, right? But given that, I cannot, the only option available for me to save my leg is to amputate.
Absolutely not.
I promise you.
Hi, everyone. So, what a cliffhanger we've got. The big question is, did Nicole amputate her leg? I think we're going to leave it there. This episode has been wonderful, and Nicole and I just kept chatting. And I don't know that we need an hour and a half episode. So, this is part one, and part two is coming out next week. Don't forget, if you're on Patreon, there is an extended episode. I think there's about 30 more minutes that Nicole and I talk about BPD and parenting and all sorts of other things. So head over there. That's going to be up now, even though the end of this episode will be next week. All right. I can't wait to hear how this ends up. I hope you're all having a wonderful Sunday because I got this out on time. Hi, listeners. Thank you for tuning in to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. That is super helpful for me. It helps us find additional folks who want to listen to the show, want to feel seen, family members who want to learn, and partners who want to understand. If you want to follow along to more than just the podcast, find us on Instagram at Bold Beautiful Borderline, find me at Borderline from Hell, or head over to boldbeautifulborderline.com where there's information, resources, a place to leave a voicemail to be heard on the podcast, which I love, and just general content. All of that information can be found in the show notes. And if you want to get exclusive content, which is bonus episodes, journal prompts, worksheets, all sorts of extra stuff, sometimes videos of me with my hair very crazy with kind of impulsive borderline rants, head over to Patreon and consider becoming a member. That is super helpful with creating content that allows me to destigmatize BPD and all of the other wild mental health struggles that we discuss on the podcast. A huge thanks to everyone who joins on the podcast to share their story and just generally helps keep this thing alive. Especially my friend Corey Evans from the Evergreen Band. He produced and created the music that is the intro and outro for this show, as well as the cover art that was created by my husband, Talon Abbott. Their information is found in the show notes. All of the information discussed in the podcast is purely personal experience. This is not medical recommendations. This is not therapy recommendations. There's no producer for this show. It's all me.